Hello and welcome to Everyone Dies. Relax and settle in for our podcast about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. Because even though everyone dies, no one must face it unprepared. In this episode, we explore elders who care for their spouses, many of them alone in this care. I'm Marianne, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 47 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are when a crisis hits. And remember, this podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
In the first half, I'm going to talk about the Godzilla Principle and how it relates to elder caregiving for their spouses and our recipe of the week. In the second half, Charlie discusses the Washington Post article by Shannon Najmandi about why older adults are being asked to care for their partners alone. Caregivers in their 60s and beyond often go through pre-bereavement as their loved ones fade and then face the financial and emotional fallout after their death. In our third half, we have the obituary of the last armed service member to leave Vietnam. Charlie, do you have anything new?
Marianne, socks. You really can't say anything bad about new socks. On the other hand, I like my old socks because they are already worn in, if you will. And on one occasion with one of the socks, a little tiny, little teeny, weeny little hole, which, I can just go ahead and either stitch it up and make myself laugh, or, I have clean socks in the drawer, unused socks in the drawer. And yet, I like the old socks, including the one with the little teeny hole in it.
Well, thank you, Rosanna Dana.
I really need to get out more. It's so what's new with you?
Well, I cannot
top that. I didn't think so.
But actually, I can. I came to a decision of, after many mismatched socks, I'm not sure where they go, but I frequently have a whole drawer full of onesies. And I finally said at my ripe old age of 68, I can get another 15 years out of a pair of socks. So I bought myself like a whole bunch of new socks and got rid of all the mismatchies.
Okay. All right. Forward momentum. It's always good. Yes.
You're never too old for new underwear or new socks.
Yes, especially new underwear. Yes, I agree with that. Okay, very good.
For our first half, we have our funeral lunch recipe is Guaczilla style guacamole. This bold, texture-rich dip features coarsely mashed Hass avocados, diced Roma tomatoes, red onion, cilantro, and fresh lime juice. It's characterized by its rustic, thick consistency, often enhanced with finely minced jalapenos and serrano peppers for heat. Bon appetit. So, the Godzilla Principle refers to a symbolic concept regarding environmentalism, risk management, and the inescapable consequences of human actions. It suggests that just as Godzilla is a monster created by humanity's nuclear transgressions, environmental disasters are climate monsters that, once awakened, cannot be reasoned with or easily controlled. So key aspects of the Godzilla Principle are that there's an irreversible rebound. Human actions, specifically environmental vandalism or negligence, will inevitably return against us. It's the concept that the earth cannot forgive these offenses, making it futile to promise to do better after the damage is done. The climate monster metaphor is part of this Godzilla Principle. Godzilla serves as a metaphor for the consequences of human arrogance or hubris. The principle urges proactive, immediate action to stop problems while they're still small, like the hole in Charlie's sock, rather than waiting until they become unstoppable forces and it's just a ball of yarn. Inevitability of confrontation is part of this also. Because the monster is brought upon ourselves, the principle suggests a reckoning is inevitable. The only solution is not to bring it upon ourselves in the first place. The Godzilla principle in context with caregivers, particularly within environmental or general discussions, refers to the idea that small problems, if left unchecked and uncared for, will grow into unmanageable, destructive monsters. Some interpretations of the Godzilla principles are heavily focused on environmental destruction because of human action, but the metaphor applies directly to the caregiver crisis, where inaction leads to catastrophic, unavoidable consequences. There are three core components of the Godzilla principle for caregivers. The first is unchangeable rebounding of neglect. Like how environmental neglect leads to climate monsters, failing to address caregiver burnout, emotional needs, or systemic support systems, like respite care, early on will lead to collapse of the caregiving situation. The second component is no forgiveness. The principle suggests that once a caregiver or care system is overwhelmed, that is, the monster is fully grown, it cannot be easily fixed with minor, late-stage interventions. And the third component is systemic neglect. This is a structural problem of taking on everything alone in family caregiving, urging early externalization and utilization of support systems. So, one of the things that's important to avoid Godzilla showing up in your life is the principle of early intervention. In project management and organizational theory, the Godzilla principle states that problems must be addressed while they are small. If left unchecked, they wax, not wane, until they are too big to handle. For caregivers, this mirrors the necessity of early intervention and preventative self-care. Small issues, such as minor burnout, a slight decline in a loved one's mobility, or a missed doctor's appointment, can rapidly escalate into monsters such as full caregiver breakdown or a sudden medical emergency if not immediately managed. If you are a family caregiver, preventative care is a powerful management strategy. Proactive early management of caregiving duties prevents the situation from becoming overwhelming. And once the caregiver starts to feel overwhelmed, there could be serious consequences for their health and their ability to stay in the caregiving role. Caregivers can shift from being crushed by the monster and experiencing total burnout by breaking away from the dominant story of lone sacrifice, by using support systems and constructing an alternative story of sustainable care. You do not have to do everything alone, despite the messages we tell ourselves. The second aspect is the Bambi meets Godzilla dynamic. In legal and social discussions, the Bambi meets Godzilla metaphor describes a situation where a vulnerable party, that is, Bambi, faces an overwhelming, immovable force, that is, Godzilla. For caregivers, this often represents the power imbalance between family caregiver and the large institutional systems like insurance companies, hospital bureaucracies, or legal frameworks. The caregiver, Bambi, may feel squashed by the sheer scale of the administrative and financial monsters they must battle to secure care and resources for their loved one. In a broader sense, this principle implies that society must act from the beginning to support caregivers, rather than waiting for a crisis to occur. While there isn't a widely recognized medical or psychological Godzilla principle specifically for family caregivers, we can see how there are two distinct contexts that apply to the caregiving experience: addressing problems early and navigating the overwhelming power dynamic of the healthcare system. Please go to our webpage for this week's recipe and additional resources for the program. This is the part where we ask for your financial support. You know, your tax-deductible gift will go directly to supporting our nonprofit journalism so that we can remain accessible to everyone at no cost. You can donate at www.everyonedies.org. That's EVERY, the number 1, dies, DIES.org, or on our site on Patreon under Everyone Dies. Charlie?
Thank you for that, Marianne. Lori Gonzalez, 75, was never educated as a nurse, but she is her husband's full-time caregiver, helping him bathe, dress, and move about in their home. She makes sure he eats and knows not to argue when he's agitated or confused, and she hasn't left him home alone in 3 years. Gonzalez knows that his dementia will only worsen and that she'll be tending to him as her own health challenges mount, including the severe stenosis that leaves her back stiff and in pain. Caring for an aging person can be financially and emotionally draining for adult children and their spouses. But partners are typically seniors. Close to half are 75 or older, and they are more likely to be caring for someone with long-term health challenges, according to a 2025 report from the National Alliance for Caregiving and AARP. Those factors put them at risk of burning through savings they might need for their own care, and of greater risk of suffering injuries from the physical demands of caretaking. Older adults caring for fellow older adults are expected to increase as lifespans lengthen and family sizes shrink. Adults 65 and older are projected to account for about 1 in 4 Americans by 2050, up more than 30% from 2024. That compares with 1 in 10 in the 1980s. Remember to factor in that nowadays families are smaller during the rise of spousal caregivers. The National Alliance for Caregiving and AARP state that about 15% of family caregivers were spouses or partners last year, compared with 10% 10 years ago. Amy Goyer, an AARP family and caregiving expert, says there may not be children to step in. Plus, spouses have a tendency to feel like, in sickness and in health, this is my job. Gerontology professor Jennifer Ailshire observed that spouses, siblings, children, and other family members are the cornerstone of the United States long-term care system, backfilling for a dearth of affordable professional care. The responsibility can be isolating and all-consuming for spouses. These caregivers tend to live with their partner, making them vulnerable to disrupted sleep, and provide such intimate care as bathing, dressing, and toileting that their spouse may be uncomfortable receiving from strangers or children. You are locked in a 24-hour, 365 cents in a way that other caregivers may not be, Ailshire said. It's a marathon with no baton to pass. Spousal caregivers often are living through a kind of pre-bereavement as they watch their partner fade and relationship change, especially if dementia is involved, said Catherine Ornstein, the director of Johns Hopkins University's Center for Equity in Aging. Some find refuge in online support groups where they can ask about the logistics of caring for an aging spouse and advice about navigating the fraught emotional terrain that accompanies it. People are talking about the best kind of diapers. I'm writing that down, Gonzalez said. There's no real training. Judith Nagel, who lives in Virginia, told a friend, be prepared to be angry. Be prepared to feel guilty because you're angry. Be prepared to be sad. You're sad for your husband, she said, and you feel guilty that you're feeling sad for yourself. Years of caregiving can decimate household finances, creating a financial sinkhole. Medicaid, the public insurance program for people with low incomes, is the primary payer for 6 in 10 nursing home residents. Some people will spend down their savings and investments to qualify for the aid. About 16% of people who entered a nursing home in 2018 and were not covered by Medicaid did just that, according to one study. Others purchased long-term care insurance, though those policies have limits on how much they'll pay. Lori Gonzalez said that the cost of elder care is a huge concern, but that Medicaid isn't an option because she and her husband have savings. She might spend them all on caring for him. But that raises a question. Will money be left for her? Remember to be proactive. Find resources in your locality. For example, a local or state Department of Aging or an ombudsman. Check local places or online about resources in your area. Search for resources on the internet. You may have to try various words and phrases before you find the information you need. When you find something online, research it. Scams are everywhere. Make sure you find what is legitimate. Marianne?
So how do you know what a legitimate resource is? How do you determine that?
What I do, I never look at the first thing that pops up online. Usually now, and I think this is the case with most folks, it immediately gives some AI answer. The problem is with AI and ChatGPT, it's not always accurate. So I will scroll down to see, for example, if John Hopkins is somewhere in the conversation, the Cleveland Clinic is somewhere, online, and go through that. That's what I use here. The other thing here in New York, even if you don't live in New York, you can use this as a template. Is we have a Department of Aging here. I will go to that Department of Aging and just type in information that I want. It will give me information here for New York City, but go to the Department of Aging in New York. See if there's a Department of Aging in your area and see what they have to say. Don't always start what immediately is presented to you. You got to dig. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reading an article saying that family caregivers have learned to be pretty adept at looking for online resources because they can't necessarily go elsewhere to try to get a resource. And so they rely on online searches and that kind of thing, and that can be very helpful.
Yeah, and like I said, what happens in New York is not necessarily what happens in Oklahoma. But if instead of just simply looking up your specific, city or town, also look at state resources, because that will cover everything. Because one small town may not have the same resources as a bigger town, but the state office, a state ombudsman, state resources can at least turn you in the right direction and help you to find someone or some organization you can contact, and will give you advice. And again, ask friends, ask family members, ask your neighbors, or like I said, find some local research, ask around, even if you don't have a lot of friends or maybe not a lot of family members who help out. It's a pain in the butt, but you got to look after yourself as well. You can't always put yourself in in second place. And it's funny we are discussing this today because a close friend of mine is going through this exactly. And and when I told her what we'd be doing, she said, can I have an advance copy? I said, no, but you will have it very, very soon. And then I just told her about some of the stuff I've been mentioning here. But Yeah, I'm sorry. On top of everything, you got to put yourself out there. In addition to your loved one, please look after yourself. Do nice things for yourself.
Well, all the
Uh,
data shows
yeah,
that the caregiver is the person who is in poorer health and
yep,
dies first than
yes,
the person who's sick.
yeah,
And people sometimes have trouble getting their head around that. But if you're not, if you're caring for your husband and you're not going for your mammogram, or you're not
yeah,
going to the doctor to get your heart checked or whatever issues you had before he got sick, and you're not giving yourself any priority, then it only makes sense that you only have so much reserve. I mean, unless, he married a spring chicken, you're old too. You got to remember that you've got your own issues, and that's why we talked about the Godzilla principle at first. Is that you think, oh, I can ignore that little twinge I'm feeling in my chest. I can ignore whatever, fill in the blank. Think of the things you're ignoring, and those things turn into bigger things and bigger things and bigger things. It's just the way it works.
Marianne, have you come across in a situation like this with a caregiver and a person being taken care of, there are family member or sometimes children around who just don't help?
All the time, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got kids who are scattered across the country.
Hmm.
They're not always aware of what's going on. I married David 7 years ago, and he's now 7 years older. I'm not, but I don't know, he is. And, our kids are all over the country. And so they don't know the day-to-day whatevers. And probably because of our personalities and that kind of thing, we've always been extremely capable people who've taken care of ourselves and everybody else.
Hmm.
They don't even ask. They
Yeah.
don't even ask.
Yeah. I get that.
Because I
Yeah.
don't think it occurs to them that we're as old as we are and that there is the potential for stuff to happen. And so, like, I've gone through different things, and Dave's gone through different things that we haven't even told him about. And then if it comes up, they'll say, well, why didn't you tell us?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in my head, it's like, well, to what end? We're not going to expect you to leave your job and come do anything, or, to what end? Why do we have, I don't know. Maybe that's the
I'm
wrong way to think, but
I have to tell you, I'm surprised to hear this because I would, if it's something, more, not, oh, I have a splinter in my finger, but I mean, just something, I do this now. Thankfully, I, don't have to go to see a boatload of doctors, but if it's something that could, turn into something uglier, I do that. I have a list now. And that I send my siblings.
I
I go,
thought you
look, this.
just I thought you
Mhm.
just announced it on the podcast, and they listen and they know what's going on.
Yeah, the schmucks. I mean, my wonderful, my wonderful siblings.
So for our third half, Juan Jose Valdez, the last Marine to leave Vietnam, has died. He was 88. Valdez was born in San Antonio on August 19th, 1937. His father was a landscaper and his mother was a homemaker from Mexico. He enlisted in the Marines in 1955 at age 17. Late in life, Mr. Valdez participated in frequent reunions with his Vietnam detachment, including a 2015 trip to Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, where a plaque was dedicated to the last American killed in action on the ground in Vietnam. The unit's surviving members had reconnected in 2000 when they traveled for a memorial service honoring their fallen comrades. Quote, "For a period, I went through survivor guilt," Mr. Valdez said in prepared remarks for the service. Why wasn't it me instead? Why did I, who had been in country longer and had already served a previous tour in Vietnam, lived and these two men died? Oh, there were and still are no easy answers. But more than anything else, he added, we need one another now. Each of us grieves, and when we grieve together, the healing begins. As President Lincoln observed after the Battle of Gettysburg, the world will little note, no longer remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here.
Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. You can find more episodes from our series about grief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Follow and subscribe to the show. Share it with someone who needs a little hope today. This is Charlie Navarrete, and from Billy Bob Thornton in the series Landman, I swear my wife would make mourners take tequila shots at an effing funeral.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.